Under the same moon, we share the love, embracing the differences like hand in glove. Spreading peace and joy, it's a beautiful sight. Together we shine in each other's light. United we stand in love's pure might. Watching the world share in love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. Colors of harmony painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Watching the World. Tonight we have Verdict Watch with our law professor, Candace Kelly. It's so amazing to have her with us. Tonight, we're going to take a few cases that are very prominent right now, and we're going to put it up to the magnifying glass in accordance with the law to help you understand where these cases are and where they may be headed. One of the cases we're going to cover is Tupac Shakur. Do you remember the amazing music that he put out? I'm pretty sure many of you still listen to his music. We also get a chance to look into the case of Luigi Mangione, who was in court just yesterday, and a few other cases that are pressing. At this point, we want to take a few moments to welcome in Candace Kelly. How are you, Candace?
Hey Mal, how are you doing?
Quite well, thank you.
Yeah, a lot going on is normal, right? As you said, it's really kind of jury selection watch when we look at Tupac and we look at what's coming up with Luigi Mangione. Or is it Mangione? I know that one day you had like declared like what it was. It's
And
going both ways.
yeah, in court they say Mangione, so I don't know.
Mangione. So yeah, a lot of the jury selection watch is what we're delving into today overall.
Yeah, so what do you think in regards to all of the new discoveries with Luigi Mangione's case?
Well, he was in court yesterday, and there was a big discussion as to whether or not the jury should remain anonymous. Now, Mel, when we go inside of these court cases and we see the jurors, we try to sum up who they are. We wonder where they're from. I remember one station specifically, you probably remember her too. Her role was to track down the jurors for after when the verdict came in with Sean Combs, because you want to hear from them. So a lot of them like to stay anonymous for that very reason. They're private. They don't want to be stalked by anybody who might know about them, because oftentimes jurors are not anonymous. But the big discussion yesterday, and this was by the defense team of Luigi Mangione, was, hey, judge, why are we making this case anonymous? The Sixth Amendment has the right to a fair and public trial, and you haven't really proven that by making these jurors anonymous that it's going to solve anything, because there haven't been any major problems presented. The judge said no, and clearly they must have known this, but this is the defense strategy, and you do try everything. The judge said no, this case is known around the world. It is international attention. If we leave the names of these jurors out in the public, someone's going to stalk them. I mean, let's be real. I mean, look at how people are just stalked online and the excitedness that they have about this case. I definitely understand what the defense was saying. I would love for it to be live streamed. That was the request of the defense attorneys, but it would not be safe for everybody involved. And I agree with the judge on this one.
Right. How do you think this case is going to compare, especially with Sean Combs? I think it'll be bigger or same?
You know what? I think it's going to be just very different because of the algorithm, right? Luigi Mangione's, his algorithm is very different in terms of the support and the healthcare system, that whether you're white or black, everyone has a comment about, right? Because everybody needs their teeth cleaned or a tooth pulled or, a slip disc in their back. So before Luigi Mangione came, a lot of people talked to people on machines and they submitted information digitally and they would get back information that they mostly didn't like, which is why there always has been this big kind of combustible discussion about healthcare and how healthcare providers are just a mad, unfortunate situation that nobody likes. Luigi came along and he became this hero so instantly because everybody could identify and say, hey, here's a face that we can put with all of the troubles and issues that we've been talking about for years. The expense, the fact that maybe I, didn't get approved for an MRI because of something very specific that a computer and an algorithm spit back. So it's very different in that way because you have more people on tap, I think, to support what he stood for, not necessarily the murder, but what he stood for. A lot of people find some, empathy in that because of what they've gone through in the healthcare system. So I think it's just a different crowd that you're playing to. And as we know, Mel, when we are in court, you are playing to the crowd inside of the courtroom as well as outside and what's going on with social media. So it's just a little different, I think, with Luigi.
Right. Are you shocked that some people feel like he had a righteous cause for sinning?
I am not shocked. Why? Because listen, I love talking about social media, and I am not shocked because it's a place where people's morals and values are destroyed, where you can have this dichotomy of not liking the murder, but kind of liking what he stands for, and being online loves chaos, right? And so I'm not surprised about what people are saying or are doing, especially in their anonymity online. Not surprised at all. I think what's going to be interesting, and you'll know this probably more firsthand than I, because I know Mel is the first one in line, people, for these cases. Let's just remind them. So I think what's also going to be just very interesting is the people outside of the courthouse, the people who you and I are going to interact with. Um, Will it be cold? I always think, is it going to be cold? Going to be hot? September to October? It might be a little bit cold, but standing on those, mornings and talking to people, that's really exciting and kind of gives you a pulse of what people are thinking about in the world. We're going to see a lot of green. We're going to see a lot of signs. We're going to, we might see Luigi in effigy. You know what I mean? But that is the type of case that we're dealing with.
Right. When I covered the hearings, I never forget it was freezing outside. I think it was like January, February. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I bring up the weather. People have to understand, Mel, right? That when we think about going in line at 5 a.m., you have to think about the weather. And so that's what always comes to my mind when I think about, all right, do I go to this case? And then what is that weather, going to be? So just like you were saying, yeah, it's been pretty cold. I've been on there in a cold morning with you. And that starts the day, and you got to get through that process first before you get to sit in court. The weather does a lot for you. And I drive in, I cross, I go through the Holland Tunnel. So if it's raining or if it's cold or if it's whatever, I have to deal with all those weather elements on two different levels.
Yeah. When I went to the first hearing, there were people dressed up as Mario Brothers. There were guys out there in the suits,
Yeah. Yeah.
freezing cold.
In the freezing cold, mostly women, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, in that green. And that's another thing that I think the attorneys have kind of co-signed, is that they know that the public is very much with Luigi for one reason or another, whether they want to come and see him, or whether they want to be a part of the conversation because it's just a popular case, or because he has so many strong supporters wearing green, like you said, that they can look out into the sea of people in the back and say, you know what? We've got something here. The public is on our side. We need this to be live streamed, which is what they requested and which is what the judge denied. But I can understand why they might say, that's a feather in our cap. We need to get the public's opinion. We need to have that inside of the courtroom, and let's make sure that everybody behaves properly. People do behave differently whenever there is a camera on. That's just the bottom line. So it would have been interesting to see how that would have been played out. But I think if I were a juror, I would have said it'd be a little bit dangerous too.
Right. I remember from the hearing, he had like a pink or red journal, and the prosecutor would call it a manifesto. And so the defense says, oh, no, we can't have that. And also, the prosecution kept calling him an executioner. But the judge says, listen, they can say it now for the hearing because there's no jury. But once the trial starts, none of that. What do you say?
Yeah, words matter. Words matter, which is why you want to get that off of the table at the beginning, because if you say executioner, if you say manifesto, and automatically I think of, Kaczynski, you don't want a juror doing that and having him be identified with Ted Kaczynski, um, uh, Kaczynski in the Unabomber. So, the words really do matter, and the judge likes to make sure that there's a clean slate and there won't be any misinterpretation. I mean, if I say to you, "Oh, someone walked up to me today, someone stalked me today, someone accosted me today," all those different words, I mean, they all mean someone approached me, but they all mean very different things. So words do matter, and it's very important that the judge cleans the slate for kind of impartial conversations to take place for the jurors.
So I have a really big concern. They keep going back and forth with the insanity plea. What's happening with that?
Yeah, that is something that that was has been dismissed so far in terms of on it was like I think it was a Tuesday, and Luigi's attorneys announced that there would be this emotional distress or insanity plea, and then the next day they took it back, and I think they took it back from what I remember on the record, because if they put that on record, then it would become public record. And when you put things on public record that might be so intimate about someone's mental state, then that again, if it's out there in the public, you have these jurors to contend with, and you don't want to plant any seeds in their head before they get to the jury box, that this guy is crazy or this guy is insane. So I think that they left that particular defense for that reason. But listen, anything's on the table right now, even a plea deal. I've been hearing a lot of talk about a plea deal on the federal level so that perhaps the state charges would go away in the name of double jeopardy. That happened with Paul Manafort actually in New York. And so there's been a little bit of talk about using that strategy to try to get Luigi to not have to go to trial on state or federal level if he pleads and makes signs a plea agreement on the federal level.
I wonder what does a plea deal look like? I mean, wouldn't it be close to life?
Yeah, well, two things. One, he would not have to go through two 8-week trials. No, nobody wants to do that. Obviously, that's a small part of his life compared to a life sentence. But yeah, a plea agreement, he still, would be going to jail, but there might be some extra help if he's able to make an insanity defense on some level. Or actually, this is what would happen. You wouldn't be able to have that defense on a federal level, but what you would do is you would skip to the sentencing phase when you have a plea agreement, and then you can bring in mitigating circumstances. So at that point, the judge would determine the sentence. There's no jury, right? Again, we're talking about a federal plea deal. And he would be able to say, well, this is how I felt about the healthcare system. This is how I felt about, this was my mental state at this time. This is what, you are able to bring in a little bit more because you go right to sentencing. And at sentencing, that's where the mitigating circumstances are brought in. So that's the difference, in that he would be able to skip the trial, go right to sentencing, and be able to talk about things that would help him in the process of that sentencing phase. So it's a little different, a lot of kind of legal strategy, but I see exactly what his defense attorneys are trying to do.
Right. I think you and I, we were in court together for his hearing where they had all of the police officers coming in from Altoona, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we were.
Um, we heard the officers give their testimony. They were cross examined. When I went to the federal hearing, the judge says no need for all of that. We don't need the officers. She said there's a memo stating that, listen, once you're arrested, all of your possessions have to be inventoried. They would have found the book bag, they would have found a gun, they would have found it all. Let's get to the trial. I was
Right.
shocked.
Yeah, and sometimes what happens on the state level plays into the federal level. If you have all of these things that are admitted and witnesses that have come in these hearings, why do it again? You can look to the state for a little direction as to how the federal case would go. Similarly, this is why on a federal level, Luigi would not want to go to trial after the state trial, because whatever the outcome is in that trial, it's going to play into what happens the federal trial. And it's just I mean, listen, he's got bad facts anyway, but he'll have worse facts when he's convicted on some level, more than likely on the state level. So they feed into each other, the federal and the state trial. And they don't want there to be a redundancy of resources, redundancy of time. You've got mostly men coming from Altoona. Why do that again? It's already on record what's involved.
Right. A lot of people are not aware that he also faces charges, I believe 5 charges in Altoona, Pennsylvania, once these 2 trials are over with.
He does. He does. It will be interesting to see how that plays out. That's a totally different state. And I would need to look at their double jeopardy rules. New York has certain interesting double jeopardy rules, which again, if he goes in the federal route first, he may be able to get out of the state charges in New York. I am almost positive it would be the same with Pennsylvania, but I would need to look into their specific double jeopardy rules, which differ state to state.
Yeah, he has Karen Agnifilo and also Mark Agnifilo as his counsel, along with the other guy. Uh, what,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts as far as her style different than her husband's?
Well, it is nice to, I think, for him. So I'm thinking about from a defense perspective, for a juror, especially if you have female jurors or male jurors, who might happen to be in her age group, to see a woman speak on his behalf is a lot more settling, opens the door more, and makes what he did a little more palatable because it's coming from a caring woman. She has a great presentation. And I say caring, not that I know her, but what she is putting on to the court and her disposition and how she behaves and how she talks. It is caring. It is something that you're going to lean into. Mark Agnifilo is a little different. I would not, as a juror, do as well listening to the facts from Mark Agnifilo. He's just a little bit different, right? That mother figure that she might represent will help him a great deal. That's what I think about her style from what I've seen in court, and her personality from what I've heard with the interviews. It's something that makes sense. And that's how people are. I mean, we all have our biases, It's kind of like if someone was brought up on a hate crime that has to do with race, and you have a Black woman defending that person, well, that's going to land differently than someone who's white.
Right.
So those buy-ins of the bias is what we get when we have people that sit in the jury box. And the attorneys are well aware of that, which is why they have jury consultants, and they try to read whatever is going on with these folks that they have seen repeatedly. They have seen the plumber, they've seen the teacher, they've seen, the music executive potentially becoming a jury. So they know how to work them. They know how to work them.
Now, you're a law professor. Here's a question for you. When
Okay.
we covered Sean Combs, also I covered the Alexander brothers and also Luigi Mangione.
Yeah.
But I noticed sometimes with these trials, whenever there's a female on the stand, when it
Mhm.
comes time for cross-examination, they have a female cross-examine her. Am I seeing things, or is that a strategy?
That is a surefire strategy if you have the right person. Why? Because again, the biases and the way that the society is built, having a man seemingly attack a woman on cross-examination doesn't make anybody feel good. Now, listen, cross-examination is built for that very thing. You're trying to catch the witness in something that they might have misstated. You're trying to impeach the witness because, they've made a mistake or they can't remember. And when you're going after someone pretty combatively often, it doesn't look good for a man to come down on a woman. Why? Because we're in a society where we know men rule in terms of positions, what they make, and status, especially a white man. So they try to get rid of that and work a woman in there so that you can leave all those biases as to why is this man attacking this woman? Now it's a woman, and you might be able to leave some of that out, some of your preconceived notions out the door. It's a strategy that is very well thought out.
Right. I saw that with Brian Steele in Diddy's case as well, right?
Yep,
When he
absolutely.
cross-examined, yes, some of the ladies didn't take too kindly to that. But anyway,
Yeah, yep. And for that very reason, what is this man doing to this woman? It's just a natural instinct that people have because we're human.
right, right. Human nature, in the words of
Yes.
Michael Jackson, right?
Yes.
Human nature, right? What are your thoughts about Tupac? That's the big topic.
Yeah, that's the big topic as they move and continue into jury selection. I think one of the most interesting things about this case is that the defendant, Keefe Davis, or Keith Davis, he's pronounced many different ways. He would have been fine, and we would have never been talking about this had he not spoken so many times to the media and talked about being at the scene, having the gun, passing the gun, and being a part of this plot to kill Tupac Shakur. Had it not been for his own words, which, by the way, that's all the prosecutors have are his own words, then we would have never heard anything about this. We heard, right, with the Netflix documentary, we heard compelling evidence once again, and I think that was his most recent interview about this topic. But he's done about 7 or 8 different interviews, wrote a book about it, where he spoke specifically. Now, his defense attorneys are saying, well, but you don't have any evidence. You just have his admissions. And the same way we won't admit rap lyrics because we know they're artistic and we know that it's a form of expression, why are we going to look at his book, one that he was selling, trying to make money for, and say that it's all true? So what they're trying to say is that he did write a book, he co-wrote it with someone. That person that he co-wrote it with will have to take the stand because that person has also admitted to making up parts of the book and filling in different parts of the conversation. So his defense strategy is going to be he might have admitted it 8 or 9 times on camera, on record, and wrote a book that contained information about it. But all of that was kind of creative afterthought in an effort to sell books. Now, I don't know if they can sell that to the jury, but that's going to be their key defense. That plus there's no physical evidence tied to him at all. There's no
Right. So,
gun, there's no fingerprints, that type of thing, no DNA.
I mean, listen, there's some content creators that say, hey, I'm in character now. This is not the real me. I'm just making up a story. So
That is
maybe,
true.
maybe there's an audience for that.
Maybe there's an audience for that. And that's why jury selection is so important. In fact, yesterday during the Mangione case, the attorneys were told, hey, work on this questionnaire to make sure that these questions meet both of your needs. They can't be too invasive of their privacy, but you have to come up with these questions. Similarly, it happened in the Tupac case. These questionnaires are very, very important to see if you're going to get someone who, like you said, might understand that a person might be a different person online than they are just downstairs making spaghetti. So, but those questionnaires will help vet who stays and who goes.
Right. Rappers make up lies all the time, so I guess the
Yeah,
concept is there, right?
Mel, that's a part of the game. I mean, some of these rappers and the money that they make now, they're not talking about, street gangs and, won't start one, what they say, won't start none, won't be. They're not talking about, they're not living those lifestyles anymore. But they're certainly not going to talk about driving around in a Benz and well, they do, But in terms of that street culture, that's a part of rap that we all understand. And I mean, I like it, right? It is great to hear the verbal linguistics of people who are rappers who were probably told in third grade that they didn't know how to read. I think it's extraordinary. But they certainly make up stuff. That's the whole point. When you go to a movie, unless they say, hey, this is based on a true story, it's all made up. That's the whole part of the artistic, creative, First Amendment supported process. Make it up. So
Hmm.
he could have his day in court to come with a strong defense in that regard.
Do you think the proffer agreement set him up for failure? Maybe lack of knowledge that, the extent of it?
Yeah, it did set him out for failure. So let's go back. He is or was a part of the Crips. By the way, he's 63 now, living down south, overcoming cancer with the grandkids doing that. But back in the day, he was running a very large cocaine ring, trafficked it across state lines. The Fed set up a big sting operation. In the process of that arrest and those charges, they said, here's our proffer agreement, which a proffer agreement, you are king for a day, so to speak, and you're able to say whatever you want to say without it being held against you. Same thing happened with Bill Cosby. And as we know, the attorneys didn't honor that agreement. And that's why he's out of jail now, because they said, wait a minute, you used information that you said you were not going to use against me. You can't do that. And that's why he got out of jail. So now fast forward to this proffer agreement, actually go back, because this was in 2008 or around 2008, 2009 when he did this. And they said the same thing. It won't be used against you. What he didn't know is that he shouldn't have gone and repeated it, because what he said in the agreement in that room, yeah, it could not be used against him. But he repeated it and made several new records of the information. So I think that he was ill-informed. I'm not saying that a defense attorney cannot argue otherwise, but he really did himself a disservice, like I said at the beginning of this, by just talking it up to begin with and making it a thing when it was nothing. It was really on him. But I agree in how you couched it, in that he didn't understand the rules and guidelines of a proffer.
Right. I heard recently the other night there's new information because he allegedly admitted some things to a mistress on the phone in jail. So they're trying to use that against him too. So,
Oh wow, I didn't hear that. And that's another thing too. Remember this, right? What they say in any arrest. Anything that you say can be held against you. Now, in different contexts, that means different things. When you're arrested, they say, anything that you say can be held against you in the court of law. But just that phrase in general, anything that you say, and I'll add and do, can be held against you in the court of law. So that if you're talking to a mistress, if you're talking to someone that you trust, and all of a sudden they may be offered a little money, or maybe the phones are tapped, that can be held against you. So we'll see whether or not it will be admitted to evidence, but anything that he says can be held against him. And hopefully he didn't continue to do himself a disservice by, saying something that could get him in further trouble.
are you shocked that this might go on for 5 weeks though?
Well, when you look at the list of potential people, I am not shocked. There are about 200 potential people, right? You've got Suge Knight. You've got people from different gang factions. You've got actually the current governor, who I think was on the police force earlier, the mayor, who was around at that time in Nevada, family members, people from the record industry. You've got the former president of Bad Boy, who was featured in the documentary. And you've got a lot of people who can tell the story and put the pieces together. Because again, prosecutors don't have a lot of evidence. So they're going to have to piece it together beautifully by the witnesses. And that can't be done with 20 people. It's got to be done with a lot of people who can actually tell the story because they were there. Because that's all they have. All they have is circumstantial evidence. So build me the circumstances with no holes by these witnesses, and then the prosecution would say that they have done their job.
You're like a great testimony to a lot of people. Can you just tell everyone what inspired you to become a law professor?
Well, one of the things that I know, and this is just by, going to law school, because I commentate on the law. I do not practice law. One of my first jobs out of law school was working at Court TV back in 19, what, I'm not going to say the year. Okay, Mel?
Okay.
I almost tripped myself up on that.
I saw that. I was like, wow.
Yeah, but over there on 600 3rd Avenue, I worked at Court TV. And the reason why I was very interested in learning about it is because I knew it was a tool that would be able to help me across the board. I actually wanted to get into divorce law because I knew I'd always be in business. Let's be real. But I didn't go that way. I went into TV to mix the law with television. I love them both. But my real role now is to break down information to my students, to people out in the world, so they can understand that they need not be afraid of the legalese. They need not be afraid of the fine print. It's written in a way that is supposed to create this barrier, but you can get over those barriers by just understanding the law. And we have a lot of, true crime followers and people who understand it more because of social media and watching TV. And I think that that's great, especially when you are picked up wrongly or rightly, you know your rights. And that's very good to have. That is very good to have as a base.
Do you think Court TV helped set the baseline for you to be great at speaking?
It did. I was on air a little bit there. They had something called, what was it called? They they launched Teen Court TV. Probably nobody remembers this. But and they would have me travel to different places with young people to talk about issues that they might be interested in, familiar with. But I actually left there to go study TV, because first I went to law school, then I went to graduate school for television and then fused them together. So it was kind of a little backwards, but I got that TV bug. It definitely helped me. Listen, I walked down the halls and you could see Johnny Cochran and you could see Grace, what's her name?
Nancy Grace?
Thank you, Nancy Grace.
Really?
Who was there? Ray Brown was there. Dan Abrams, who's over at News Nation and also founded other station. He was there. There were a lot of people who I have known for decades who were, we're still circling, still see each other. Of course, the format has changed, but here we are. But Court TV was a fine place to be. I came right after the OJ verdict. And so, people, that was one of the things where people were doing this armchair, legal justice at home and looking at the judge, looking at all the witnesses, looking at Johnny Cochran. And that was the time where the doors were really open into what is going on in our legal system and kind of paying it this almost gross attention that we're very used to now. But back then it was, it was becoming more popular and popular and popular. So it definitely was the basis. Court TV founder Stephen Brill. I don't know what he's doing now, but I remember him walking down the halls and doing his thing. But it was an exciting, engaging place full of a lot of people who've gone to law school and were like, I am not trying to practice. And they got into TV. And it was Terry Moran, before he was let go at ABC. I mean, he did a fine job anchoring at Court TV. If anybody remembers Greg Jarrett, I don't know if he's still on air, but I think he went over to Fox. But he was not, I don't know if he started at Court TV, but that's where he got a very, very big foundation. So all of that kind of plays into today and what we know about how we cover cases, because Court TV was the pioneer in that.
All right. So now it's your time to let me experience your questions with Nolan Wells.
Yeah, this is one I've been following a few cases today. That was not at the top of my list. I know that there's always major developments, but what is it? I did see a headline about his parents and the phone. What was beneath the headlines that I read?
Well, for the most part, everybody's going crazy because the parents have not released the phone to the authorities. So, especially everybody, it's like one side against the other. So, everybody that's countering is saying, listen, the phone should have been handed over. Even on Nancy Grace tonight, she was breaking down how they could, get a subpoena. There's different methods to acquire the phone. But so far, they're holding it tight to the vest.
Yeah, I could, as a parent, of a child who died on July 4th, I could understand. I'm going to hold on to this phone. Nobody bothering me about it. And when the subpoena comes, I will give up my child's personal phone with all his texts. And I was looking up some pictures the other day, and my father passed in 2020, but I screenshot, like, before we let the phone go, I screenshot messages, of my conversations, just to make sure that I had them. And since then, I've changed phones and I wouldn't have had them. So I can understand holding on to something that really is an expression of your child, from pictures to videos to things he posted. It's all on that phone. And I think that that makes sense for grieving parents. We're in July. I mean, that happened in July. We're just 6 weeks out. I'd want that phone myself.
Right, right. Lunatic has said, did the other teens turn in their phone? That's a good question.
That is a good question. And I do not know the answer. But I will delve into that. Like I said, this isn't on the top of my, why it's not on the top of my list necessarily, is because everybody has these developments, and it's kind of like it's a lot of conjecture, which I can appreciate. That's what we do in opinion-based journalism. But I will look into that, is the final answer, to see whether or not they turned in their phones. My guess is probably, I don't know. I don't know. It's coming if they haven't, or maybe they've already done it. Because listen, they're convening a grand jury, as we know, in order to present the evidence, and they probably would need the phones from everybody as evidence. His parents will have to release that phone soon in this process. My guess is that the kids have also, his friends, put those in quotes, have already released their phones, but let me check that out.
Yeah, we're starting to see a new day in time because they have attorneys now that are pushing back, threatening with defamation cases if people continue to accuse them of any sort of crime or something out of their names.
Yeah, and I've said on your show before, they have some good cases if they go about it the right way. And this isn't, again, saying this side or that side. I'm just talking about the law. This is libel per se, accusing someone of murder, or saying specifically, they did it. You cannot do that. And they would have very strong cases. I would never want to be at the end of that type of speculation, where it's not just maybe and allegedly, people saying they did it. They did it. I know they did it, because that's very different than, a structured presentation of your opinion. And they go about it the right way, they will get some people taken down.
Yeah, this case is still flying high.
Yeah,
A lot of momentum.
a lot of momentum. I'm wondering, in your opinion, you know, what you think about these autopsies that kind of not have they haven't brought us much, as well as just your thoughts about how public opinion will play into it, because that's all we're hearing now is public opinion. Do you think that that has kind of engineered this process in any way?
I think coming out with the secondary preliminary autopsy kind of hurt the case because I think it once Ben Crump came out and they said it's undetermined, unknown. It sets the stage, number one, with the court of public opinion to say, well, listen, there's no there. So that's already been revealed. So now when they come out with the primary and they say, oh, it was a drowning, there's nothing there, then you have really no recourse.
Yeah. I mean, if they didn't rule out that there could be foul play, I believe the autopsy said that they just couldn't make that determination that there was, based upon the fact that, I mean, not all of Nolan's parts were there to examine, which made it difficult to figure that out from the body. The body could not tell the full story. But I think that you're right in that, because there's nothing definitive, I think people, again, I have not Googled this specifically the way that I was weeks ago. Has it died down in a way, or is that just me and my algorithm?
Just a little bit.
Just a
It's
little bit,
it's
right?
it's starting to trend down. I'm starting to see it. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I think. And guess what? I think that's pretty good. Do you think that it's helpful that, you know what? Let it die down a little bit, because the life of its own that it took on and has taken on, I mean, it's as big as a dinosaur. Do you think that it's good for a little break, like maybe a little less bend, a little, or do you think, no, 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 let's keep this alive? His parents, they need to keep on doing these things, so that it's on people's minds.
I think it needs to be on full throttle.
Okay.
No breaks. No breaks, you know.
Yeah, and that's what we've been talking about all night. What you say on the outside, you have to come up with a strategy, and I mean outside of the courthouse, for what goes on the inside, because they are so interconnected, more than they ever have been. What's an example that you have of, where someone on the outside interfered with the legal process or court proceedings, whether it was an influencer, or I don't know, someone from the public? What comes to mind?
That's a good question. I could tell you the opposite. I could tell you how I feel the authorities on their police report. I think that hindered the case.
Ah,
But to answer your question, let me see. Um, I think for the most part, when you have TikTokers and people just making up their own facts, like tonight, there's a big storyline going around, and it's the attorney for, I think his name is Bart,
okay.
but he makes a statement and he says something like, the way they play it, it sounds like he's saying that Nolan was tragically killed on my client's boat. But when you go back and you play the entire video, right? Now this is going
Mhm.
viral. When you
Yeah.
play the whole thing, he's actually quantifying and saying basically that his people are accusing and saying that Nolan was
Ah,
trapped. You see what I'm saying? So
the
so
whole
that
the whole context they took it out of.
that's very deceiving. It's terrible.
Yeah, and that has to do a lot with just kind of media literacy, just how we read and understand. And you always have to go back and listen to the whole quote. You just do. You always
Right.
have to go back, and it's easy to take something out of context. I think I remember once when one of the influencers revealed the name of one of the rape victims as if it was nothing. you know and the judge had to talk about it, and admonition to everybody involved. He just could not believe that someone on the outside, literally standing on the outside of the courthouse, right? Because many times people will go in, influencers or reporters, and they can leave when they want, and they can report and give updates. So you can't have someone on the outside sharing rape victims' names. That's why we protect them. We protect them for a very good reason. And I just think, like you said, some of the rules, some of the making up of stuff often is not followed. Often is not followed.
Right. I think that Luigi Mangione might prove to us that the court of public opinion
Hmm.
stands tall, because I think in his case you might be startled because a lot of people in the public, they see him as being righteous in a weird kind of way. Some people.
Oh, I think many people. I also think that many people, in the world of looks maxing and in the world of people trying to be the best version of themselves, they like to identify with him, because he does have all of these outwardly things that people appreciate, whether it's the tone of his skin, or he's got a full head of hair and a six pack and his, all these things that are making. I've seen some of my students, I'm like, wow, you really like this guy. It's incredible to think. that everyone is so into him, but they would like to identify him, and they feel aligned with him, not just with the health stuff, but because they aspire to have some of the things physically that he has. May sound strange, but just think about the world in which we live and how much is based on looks and men and looks maxing. All right. Now you've got this handsome guy, according to many people, who's doing something that they also believe in terms of shooting this CEO and making a statement. Now they've got their face with all of the issues in the healthcare system. So, but they are weird dynamics, very weird dynamics.
Right. Especially from the fact if he was a homeless guy, no pun to the homeless, I think
Yeah,
it would have came across different. But the fact that he was sort of had money, lots of money, perhaps, very educated, all of those things that most people strive for, he had it and he sacrificed it. That's the spin. He sacrificed it to make a point for humanity, but he committed murder. And that's where this is getting a little sketchy.
exactly, exactly. And I like what the word you use, strive. A lot of people strive for that financial position too. He's got a lot of things that people admire, and a lot of people see themselves in him, or they want to see themselves in him because they're striving.
Absolutely. We reached our time. What's going
What?
on?
We reached our
Done like
time.
10 minutes. Yeah. I don't know why our shows go so fast.
Well, Mel, I know why. Because we have a good time.
Yeah.
And you know what? There's a lot just going on culturally and legally, and we're immersed in all of it. In fact, do you have plans where you're going to travel next? Or are you going to wait for Luigi, which is what, September the 8th?
Next week I go to Carmelo Anthony down in Texas. And then
Oh
I
my.
go the next week after that, I go to LA for Tupac.
Wow.
So I'm
Wow.
busy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Very busy.
yeah. Go out there to Nevada, right?
Then I'll do Luigi all the way through uninterrupted.
Yeah, on what might be some pretty decent mornings. Not too cold, not too hot out there in those lines. Since you get there before me, let me already put in my just word of you can go ahead and save me a place and we can square up when I get there.
All right. Very good.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Would you like to give us some parting words?
Well, I'm at Candace Kelly TV on Instagram. Follow me. My show is The Takeaway with Candace Kelly. I discuss all types of legal and cultural issues. And I look forward to seeing you, not next week. I will be out in LA, but the week after. So hello to everyone and goodbye to everyone.
Different voices, but the same song. Loving a world where we all belong. Kindness leading the way, breaking the chains. In the symphony of love, the thing remains. Embracing diversity, brighter days in sight. Watching the world sharing love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. Colors of harmony, painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might. Watching the world sharing love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. The colors of harmony, painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might.
All right. Thank you very much.